What happens when royalty meets reality television and refuses to play by the rules? In just 37 seconds, one comment would turn a friendly interview into the most shocking ejection in late-night television history. Jon Stewart had interviewed presidents, celebrities, and world leaders. He'd handled controversial topics with grace and humor for years. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold on this particular evening. The audience settled into their seats, expecting the usual witty banter and insightful conversation. Instead, they were about to witness a collision of egos that would leave everyone in the studio absolutely speechless. Prince Harry walked onto the stage with an air of confidence that immediately felt different from other guests. There was something in his posture, something in the way he acknowledged the applause, that suggested this interview might not go according to plan. Jon stood to greet him, extending his hand with his trademark warm smile. "Welcome to the show," Jon said, gesturing toward the guest chair. Harry sat down, adjusting his jacket with a slight smirk. "Thanks for having me. Though I must say, I've been on better sets." The audience laughed nervously, unsure if this was a joke or a genuine criticism. Jon raised his eyebrows, keeping his composure. "Well, we do our best with what we have. So, let's jump right in. You've been quite vocal lately about your experiences, your family, and your new life. What made you want to come on the show tonight?" Harry leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs. "Honestly, I thought it would be easy publicity. Your show seemed like a softball kind of situation." Jon's smile tightened, just slightly. The audience could sense the shift in energy. Softball? I'm not sure anyone who sat in that chair would describe this as softball. "Maybe they were just being polite," Harry replied, waving his hand dismissively. "Look, I've dealt with the British press my entire life. American talk shows are child's play compared to that." Jon nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Right. Well, let's talk about some of the things you've said publicly. You've made some pretty serious allegations about your family, about the institution you were born into. Do you ever worry about the impact of your words?" Harry's expression hardened. "Impact? You mean, do I worry about telling the truth? No, I don't. The truth needs to be heard, whether people like it or not." "I'm not questioning your truth," Jon said carefully. "I'm asking if you consider how your very public complaints might affect others, including people who can't exactly respond in the same way." "That sounds like you're defending them," Harry shot back, leaning forward. "Are you seriously going to sit there and lecture me about my own family?" The audience went silent. Jon shifted in his seat, maintaining his professional demeanor. "I'm not lecturing anyone. I'm asking questions. That's kind of the point of an interview." Harry laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Questions, right? You Americans love to pretend you understand what it's like to grow up in a system like that. You have no idea what I've been through." "You're absolutely right," Jon said evenly. "I don't know what it's like to be a prince, but I do know what it's like to have a conversation. And right now, you're making that pretty difficult." "Maybe I'm making it real," Harry countered. "Maybe you're just not used to guests who don't kiss your feet and tell you how brilliant you are." Jon took a deep breath, and the audience could see him counting to 10 internally. "Look, I invited you here to have a genuine discussion. If you came here just to be antagonistic, then maybe we should end this now." Harry stood up slightly, then sat back down. "See? That's the problem with people like you. The moment someone doesn't play your game, you want to shut it down." "People like me?" Jon repeated, his voice calm but firm. "What exactly does that mean?" "Media people. Talk show hosts. You act like you're giving people a platform, but really you just want them to dance like puppets for your audience." Jon spread his hands. "You literally asked to be on this show. Your people called my people. Nobody forced you to be here." "I thought it would be different," Harry said, his voice rising. "I thought you'd actually understand. But you're just like everyone else. The camera operators glanced at each other, unsure whether to keep rolling. John's producer stood off stage, watching nervously. This was spiraling fast. "Help me understand then," John offered, trying to pull the interview back. "What did you expect from tonight?" Harry shook his head. "I expected respect. I expected someone who wouldn't question my every word like I'm some kind of liar." "I haven't called you a liar once," John said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "I've asked you to explain your perspective. That's what an interview is." "Your tone says everything," Harry insisted. "I can hear it. The skepticism, the judgment." John leaned forward, looking directly at Harry. "My tone is confused because you came on this show already angry. You walked out here with an attitude, and frankly, I'm trying to figure out why." "Maybe because I'm tired," Harry said loudly. "Tired of people thinking they can psychoanalyze me. Tired of everyone having an opinion about my life." "Then why do interviews?" John asked simply. "Why write books? Why do documentary series? You can't put your entire life in the public sphere and then get angry when the public has questions." Harry's face flushed. "You don't get it. You really don't get it." "Then explain it to me," John said, his voice steady. "That's what I'm asking you to do." "I don't owe you an explanation," Harry snapped. "I don't owe anyone anything." The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This had gone from awkward to genuinely hostile. John glanced at his notes, then back at Harry. "Okay," John said quietly. "Let's try a different topic. Your charity work. You've done some important things for veterans, for mental health awareness. Can we talk about that?" Harry waved his hand again, that same dismissive gesture. "If you want. Though I'm sure you'll find some way to twist it into something negative." John set his cards down on the desk. "I haven't twisted anything. I've literally just asked you questions." "Loaded questions," Harry corrected. "Every single one has been loaded." "Name one," John challenged. "Tell me which question was loaded." Harry paused, seeming caught off guard. "All of them. The way you phrase things, the way you look at me. It's all designed to make me look bad." John laughed, not unkindly, but with genuine disbelief. "I asked you why you wanted to come on the show. How is that loaded?" "The implication," Harry said, though he seemed to be struggling now. "The implication behind it." "There was no implication," John replied. "It was literally the most basic opening question I could ask." Harry stood up suddenly. "You know what? I don't need this. I don't need to sit here and be disrespected." John remained seated, looking up at him. "Nobody's disrespecting you. You've been hostile since the moment you sat down." "Because I knew this would happen," Harry said, his voice getting louder. "I knew you'd be just like the rest of them." "The rest of who?" John asked, standing now too. "I'm trying to have a conversation with you." "A conversation?" Harry laughed bitterly. "This isn't a conversation. This is an interrogation." John spread his arms wide. "I've asked you maybe 5 questions total. Most interviews have 20 or 30. We're barely 10 minutes into this." "10 minutes too long," Harry muttered. The audience gasped softly. John's face showed genuine frustration now, the professional mask slipping just slightly. "Look," John said, his voice firm, "I don't know what you expected tonight, but I've been more than fair. I've tried to give you space to talk, to explain yourself, to share your perspective. You've responded with nothing but attitude and accusations." Harry pointed at John. "Don't you dare lecture me. You have no idea who you're talking to." "I know exactly who I'm talking to," John said, his voice rising to match Harry's. "I'm talking to a guest on my show who's being incredibly rude for no apparent reason." "No reason?" Harry's voice went up an octave. "You've been condescending from the start." "I've been professional," John corrected. "There's a difference." Harry grabbed his microphone pack, fumbling with it. "I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore." John watched him struggle with the equipment. "You're really going to walk out?" "Watch me," Harry said, finally getting the pack off and dropping it on the chair. John turned to the audience, then back to Harry. This is ridiculous. You came here, you agreed to this interview, and now you're throwing a tantrum because what? Because I asked you questions? Because I didn't treat you like you're special? I am special, Harry shouted, and the entire studio went dead silent. Those 3 words hung in the air like a bomb. The audience sat frozen. The crew stopped moving. Even John seemed momentarily stunned by the outburst. "Excuse me?" John said quietly. Harry seemed to realize what he'd said, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. "You heard me. I'm a prince. I'm royalty. I deserve to be treated with respect." John's expression shifted from frustration to something colder, more resolute. "Respect is earned, and right now, you're acting like a spoiled child." "How dare you?" Harry hissed. "How dare you speak to me that way?" "How dare I?" John repeated, his voice incredulous. "You've insulted my show, my questions, my professionalism, and now you're demanding respect. That's not how this works." Harry moved toward the edge of the stage. "I'm leaving, and trust me, you're going to regret this." "Regret what?" John asked. "Regret trying to do my job? Regret treating you like every other guest who sits in that chair?" "You should have treated me better," Harry insisted. "You should have known who I am." John walked around his desk, standing at full height. "I know exactly who you are. You're someone who came on this show looking for a fight. You're someone who can't handle basic questions without turning it into a personal attack. And you're someone who just showed this entire audience your true colors." Harry's face went red. "My true colors? You want to talk about true colors? You're a failed comedian playing journalist. You're nothing but a performer, pretending to be relevant." The audience audibly gasped. John's jaw clenched, but his voice remained controlled. "Get off my stage." "Gladly," Harry spat. "This show is beneath me anyway." "Security," John called out, not taking his eyes off Harry. "Please escort our guest out of the building." 2 security guards appeared from backstage. Harry looked at them, then back at John. "You're actually doing this?" "You wanted to leave," John said simply. "I'm helping you leave." Harry laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "This is unbelievable. You're actually throwing me out?" "You threw yourself out the moment you decided to be disrespectful," John replied. "I gave you multiple chances to have a real conversation. You chose confrontation instead." The security guards moved closer. Harry held up his hands. "Don't touch me. I'm leaving on my own." "Make sure he leaves the building," John instructed the guards calmly. Harry started walking toward the exit, then turned back one more time. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career." John shook his head slowly. "No, the biggest mistake would have been letting you continue to disrespect this show, this audience, and me. Have a good night." Harry opened his mouth to say something else, but one of the security guards gently guided him toward the door. The audience watched in complete silence as Prince Harry was escorted off the stage, through the studio, and out of sight. John stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay quiet. Finally, John turned back to his desk, straightened his jacket, and looked directly at the camera. "Well," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos that had just unfolded. "That was unexpected." A few nervous laughs rippled through the audience. John sat back down in his chair, taking a deep breath. "You know," he continued, "I've been doing this job for a long time. I've had thousands of guests sit in that chair. Some of them I've disagreed with. Some of them have disagreed with me. We've had heated debates, tough conversations, challenging moments. But I've never, in all my years of doing this, had someone come on the show already looking for a fight." The audience remained quiet, hanging on every word. "I don't know what happened before he walked out here," John went on. "I don't know what he was expecting. But I can tell you what I was expecting. I was expecting to have a conversation. That's it. A conversation between 2 people about interesting topics. That's what this show is. That's what it's always been. He shuffled his papers, his hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. When someone comes on this show, I don't care if they're a prince or a plumber. I treat them with respect, and I ask them questions. Real questions. Sometimes tough questions, sure, but that's the job, and I expect the same respect in return. The audience began to nod, understanding. What you just saw, John said, pointing toward the exit, was someone who couldn't handle being treated like everyone else. Someone who expected special treatment because of who they were born as. And when they didn't get it, they lashed out. He paused, looking directly into the camera. I don't regret how I handled that. I asked fair questions. I tried multiple times to have a genuine discussion. But you can't force someone to have a conversation if they've already decided you're the enemy. The audience started to applaud, slowly at first, then building. John held up his hand. Look, I'm not trying to pile on here. I'm just telling you what happened. You all saw it. You all heard it. I'm not going to pretend it was something it wasn't. He took another breath, composing himself. The thing is, respect goes both ways. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, or what title you have. If you can't show basic respect to the people around you, then you don't deserve respect back. It's that simple. More applause, stronger this time. John smiled slightly, the tension starting to leave his shoulders. I wanted tonight to be different, he admitted. I really did. I thought we could have an interesting conversation about his experiences, his perspective, his journey. Instead, we got whatever that was. He gestured vaguely toward the door. But you know what? That's okay. Because sometimes the most revealing moments aren't the ones we plan. Sometimes the most honest truth comes out when someone shows you exactly who they are, without any filter. The audience was fully with him now, nodding and murmuring agreement. So, to everyone watching at home, I apologize that tonight's interview didn't go as planned. But I don't apologize for standing up for this show and for basic standards of decency. Nobody gets to come in here and act like that. I don't care who they are. Standing ovation. The entire audience rose to their feet, applauding John's handling of the situation. He stood, acknowledging them with a slight bow. We're going to take a quick break, he announced. When we come back, we'll try to salvage what's left of tonight's show. Stick around. The cameras cut, and John finally let out the breath he'd been holding. His hands were still shaking as he reached for his water glass. The warm-up comedian rushed over, as did several producers. You okay? One of them asked. John nodded. Yeah, I'm okay. That was insane. You handled it perfectly, another producer said. Absolutely perfectly. But John wasn't thinking about how he'd handled it. He was thinking about those 3 words. I am special. The entitlement in Harry's voice when he'd said them. The genuine belief that his title meant he deserved different treatment. The audience was buzzing, everyone talking at once about what they'd just witnessed. Some were pulling out their phones, already texting friends and family. This was going to be everywhere by tomorrow morning. John's stage manager approached. We've got about 2 minutes until we're back. Do you want to do another segment, or should we just call it? John thought for a moment. Let's do another segment. I don't want to end the show on that note. We'll do something light, something fun. Get people's minds off of what just happened. You sure? The stage manager asked. Nobody would blame you for wrapping early. I'm sure, John said firmly. That guy doesn't get to ruin the whole show. The stage manager nodded and went to prepare. John sat back down at his desk, straightening his tie and taking another sip of water. The makeup artist rushed over to check his face, making sure he looked camera ready. 30 seconds, someone called out. John rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck, and put his professional face back on. Whatever happened next, he wasn't going to let one difficult guest derail everything. And we're back in 5, 4, 3. The lights came up, the audience applauded, and Jon Stewart smiled at the camera like nothing had happened. Because that's what professionals do. They keep going, no matter what chaos erupts around them. But everyone in that studio knew they'd just witnessed something extraordinary. Something that would be talked about for years to come. The night a prince walked onto a talk show and proved that titles mean nothing when respect is absent. The night Jon Stewart stood his ground and refused to be intimidated by royalty. The night that showed everyone watching that no matter who you are, actions have consequences, and attitude matters more than ancestry.